Yay. Okay. I think it's working.
Are we here?
All the places. Yeah, it's working. I've got Command Central with like 3 monitors, like to make sure that I don't screw it up.
That's good.
And if I do, there's a backup plan.
You are actually the one in charge today. So. By the way, it just occurred to me. It just occurred to me as we were coming on live that we both got the memo. Wear black today.
Yeah, you got the dress code. Good, great.
Yeah,
black
right.
on the bottom as well, because my pants are black too. Which
mine are too.
Nailed it. Good, great, perfect. And accessories, perfect.
There you go.
Yay! Well, awesome. We are live now, so I should be able to see all the things. And do all the things. So yeah, I'm going to point which way. Oh, there you are. You're this way this time.
Oh, and there you are.
I am Meredith White, and I teach Spanish just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, in the same place as this guy.
Yeah, and I'm Bob Patrick, and I don't teach Spanish, but I teach Latin in the same district outside of Atlanta. And Meredith and I have known each other, what?
Well, you know what? I remember, I don't know if you remember this. We sat next to, at Skolt 2012, I got my table moved. I sat down in somebody's seat at lunch.
Right.
And then they came back, like they had gone to the bathroom, and I didn't like know anybody. So I was like, okay. Like it's that weird conference thing of like, they say, go eat lunch, meet friends. And I'm like, I don't want to meet friends. I want to just have friends here. And I didn't. And so I sat down, and then the person came back to their lunch with their friends who they had come with. And so then I actually got bumped to the table that the like teacher of the year nominees were at. And so I was sitting there like way out of my league going like, no, I'm not, because it said reserved, and she's like, oh, just go here. And somebody was like very inconvenienced.
Well, that was
the only chair left.
That was the year that I was up for ACFL Teacher of the Year from the Southeast. And there are only 5 of us, right? At a table for 10. So there was plenty of room. And I had forgotten entirely about that, because if you think you were nervous about not having any friends at ACFL, I was the first Latin teacher that had made it to the final 5. Yeah, I was the first one. And it was like, everybody's going, oh, is it Latin?
Right. I thought, and you're like, yes.
You mean Spanish? No, Latin.
Right. I think you mispronounced Spanish. It sounded like you said Latin.
Anyway, anybody who knows Meredith knows that she is very difficult to make friends. And
at lunch, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because you had like a little placard, and then this person had a little placard. And I was like, trying to find my name tag and like a sticker to make sure like I had paid for lunch. And it was like, this is a humiliating experience. I just need to like get to lunch earlier from now on. Now we're
at least 8 years we've known each other. So
for sure.
It's been great, and we love collaborating. And I think I mentioned this in the little invite that I put out yesterday, is that we have these conversations all the time. It just occurred to us that maybe it might be fun to have these conversations in front of people who want to be a part of these conversations. So let's just remind folks that there's a chat box in their Facebook page. If let's see,
there should be a way too when they pop up. We need Bertha because she's the expert. When they pop up too, I'll be able to like display them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just moved to live comments so I can see live comments.
Oh, perfect! Yay!
Okay, so people, as we're having conversations, if people want to make a contribution, if they want to ask a question, just pop it in there, and I'll try and keep up with those and bring them into our conversation. So, speaking of which, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, well, so we got a couple of things going on. And like I said, reading that blog post this morning, I don't know why granted he wrote, I was gonna say, I don't know why I bookmarked it so long, but it was like 4 days. But now I feel like we're in this time warp of like, we don't know what's going on. So every day I'm like, well, the other day, that was an hour ago. So get it together. But just a lot of like blog posts and conversations. and a lot of emotion behind, I think, a couple of different threads that actually tie together really well, which is, well, I mean, we're all under this umbrella of what the heck are we going to do in like a few weeks for us? You know, for us, it's a few weeks. It's less than a month. And so it's like, what are we going to do? Especially if you're, which, and we all should be, but like, you know, let's be honest, I haven't taught comprehensibly my whole career. You know, my first few years, I was very incomprehensible because I just thought staying in Spanish was what I was supposed to do. So if you're working under sort of a comprehensible input framed umbrella, you know, whatever that means for your situation and however you've been able to accommodate that, we're now having a lot of conversations that we may have been having in different ways for different amounts of time, and with different people. But now a lot of these conversations, like I mentioned, John Cowart's blog post, which is incredible. I can link it in the comments. Like we're now having them kind of publicly, much to our chagrin, maybe, or maybe not. And so how are we framing this like CI framed teaching that we're doing while we're having some of these, you know, equity conversations that we should be having, but also what is the role of some of those resources that we've purchased or the PD that we've invested in? Because now we're all super emotionally invested in that because again, we're going like, what the heck are we going to doing? What are we doing? And how can we manage all of this while not feeling like just going a million miles an hour in our minds all the time?
One of the ways that I see that coming up a lot, at least among Latin teachers, but I really think this is bigger than us, Latin teachers who are teaching from a CI framework, is so on the one hand, those of us who've been doing it a little longer have this experience that teaching with CI framework principles pushes us, forces us, redirects us to create classrooms that are more equitable. That's been our experience. But then there's another observation, which is accurate and helpful, if not painful, to say, yeah, but some of the materials that we have access to are inequitable. They don't represent everybody in the room. They make use of themes that can be racist or sexist or homophobic. Some of the people will say, well, I had this movie talk experience, or I had this TPRS experience, or I had this TPR experience, and the teacher or the leader did XYZ, and it hurt. It was, it was racist, it was sexist, it was homophobic, it was it was ableist, fill in the blank. So there's the content question. What kind of content are you using? And there's as the one making the decisions about what we're going to do in class today, how am I being shaped to make the classroom more equitable? And I'll tell you just one example. There's a popular textbook. I'm not gonna bash any companies today, because actually I think I see a lot of companies working really hard to rethink what they're putting out, which is a good thing. But there's one really popular textbook among Latin teachers that treats the issue of slavery, Roman slavery, badly. It just does. And I taught with that book for a number of years, and I've for a long time been really sensitive to what we do with the word. In Latin, the word for slave is servus, S-E-R-V-U-S. It looks like servant. And kids very quickly to start thinking of that word as servant. So when I was using that textbook, and we first arrived at the use of that word, it would be put on the brakes. Let's stop and talk about this. This is not a servant. This is an enslaved person.
Wow.
And these people who look so jolly to have them in their home are the enslavers. And that reaches instantly, it's no longer a lovey-dovey familia, right? So that's how I'm hearing a lot of these issues going on. It's like those of us working with a CI framework know that it pushes us into more equitable work in the classroom, and some of the content that we have or have chosen to use is very problematic. So
absolutely. And then my question in a lot of this, and I'm as a Latin teacher, Spanish teachers are a dime a dozen, I mean, like, no offense to I know, a lot of people are department of one, and I totally get that. And I'm teasing because I'm in a department of 14. You go to a conference and the sessions are, the examples a lot of times are in Spanish. I have no problem finding resources. Sure. And so my big question is, what is our commitment to resources when we find things? For example, when we find things like you're saying, looking back and going, oh, wow, like this is not, like I'm reading this differently now. And this is, like you said, insert an ism or an ist here. And I'm embarrassed that I use it, but we're moving on. I think sometimes I think we do with resources what we do with conferences, which is a lot of times you might go to a session that you found ineffective and you're like, okay, well, I try to take something. My department chair says, can I learn one thing? Can I learn one thing from this session? Cool. Yeah. Then it wasn't a waste of my time. And also I'm an adult, vote with your feet, move on, move to something else, be discreet, be polite. But there's always somebody leaving grumbling like, oh, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Yeah. And I think because we've invested our time and it's so personal and we know that we're teachers and we don't have infinite amounts of money, time, energy, etc. I think we do the same thing with resources where, what am I going to use now? Right. And you're seeing a lot of conversations come up about what do we do with the resources that we've got? If we've got this book that says, that paints this person as this person, okay, I can't in 4 weeks start the school year looking some kind of way. We have no idea how it's going to look. And also simultaneously be revamping everything I use. So my question is too, at what point are we so invested in our resources that we may be frustrated when we have to change them? We may feel helpless when we have to change our lens. And do content creators owe us that? Do they owe us a constant stream of revisions?
Well, no, that's a bunch of questions there. Do content creators owe us a constant stream of revisions? And, that's easier and more difficult depending on who the content creators are. Right. For instance, I'm a writer of novellas. Right now in Latin, we have, so 4 years ago, 2013 was when the first Latin novellas came out. Cool. Rachel Ash and Miriam Patrick, my daughter, put out the first one. I put out the second one. So 7 years ago, we had none. We had zero. Right now, we are approaching 70 individual Latin novellas. Now, I bring that up to say most of us are publishing with a subsidiary of Amazon. And the lovely thing about that is that we don't have to have a stockpile of any hard copies. It's print as you go with this company. And if, for instance, tomorrow I wake up, and I'm going to make use of something that John Cowart said in a minute, but if I wake up tomorrow aware suddenly that something I've written has grotesquely mistaken or has taken a direction that is one of those ists and isms that, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that. I can go in, I can edit the text and hit a button, and it's changed instantly. Wow. So for people who are publishing like that, I think we can and probably ought to expect constant revisions. One of the things that we do is we invite our readers to let us know if they find a problem in the book. Not just well, I would prefer if you had the margins this size, but on such a page I found a mistake, or on such and such page I think that what you have the character doing is racist. If we get back, we want that kind of feedback, and we have the ability to make adjustments. Textbook publishers. I was on a textbook publishers advisement committee for years, working on the next edition. I was on the committee for 5 years. That was 5 years ago, and the next edition is still not out. So textbook revisions are a much more painful and tedious, time-consuming, money-consuming process. So there's that, and something else you mentioned that I had almost laughed out loud. Teachers get upset when there's change. Teachers get upset.
Absolutely.
Not teachers.
Impossible. I like change, and I resent the fact that you would even, but don't change. So.
Right. We're all, listen, this is how it is. This is how it is. As you mentioned, in our district, we're just kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop. We don't know we know there's a start date, April 12th. We know that parents have been given the choice of kids going back face to face or going online, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're waiting. What does that look like? How are we expected to do all this? And I don't know if you know this or not, but last night in our system, you're able to go in and see your class rosters.
Yeah. Oh, I've already been in with a little computer next to their name. Thank you.
Yep. And it shows you which ones are going to be distance and which ones are going to be face to face. I discovered that at 10:42 last night.
Yep.
And yes, I texted it out.
Yes. Thank you. Dear group chat, look what I found.
And then I went to sleep, and they all carried it on for another hour. But I mean, that's how we are about change. It's like, what? My book's changing, my room's changing, my people are changing.
Right.
I thought I was teaching Latin 3. What do you mean I'm teaching Latin 1? It's like,
they're like, good news, you're now the head football coach and you teach marketing. And you're like, but somehow we would make that work, and I think that's what teachers, I read somewhere a few years ago that teachers don't fear change as much as they fear not being supported when they change. And I was like, I felt super seen and exposed because I was like, we will roll with the punches. Like, we turned this whole show like digital over a weekend. Like, I'm like, do non-teachers realize that Friday the 13th was a Friday? Obviously, we left the 12th and then it was like, I think we're going to be digital for like a couple of days, just a couple of days, and we were like, okay, it was like the snow day, like whatever. And like 4 months later, it's like,
here we are.
We've not been back. Right. Here we are. Literally exactly like to the day, almost 4 months later, we're like, I don't quite know what happened. And I still don't know what day it is. So we turned this whole thing online almost on a dime. And so it's not that we can change, but also I spent my own money and I'm using things that I thought in my head of like, oh, I got to pay for this myself, But at the end of the day, again, my reflection still comes back to, are we looking at resources and just kind of assuming it's like a buy once, use forever mindset? And I've been guilty of things like that. And then I have to stop back and go, stop, nothing is. I mean, if it was buy once, use forever, you'd probably still fit in those old jeans.
Yep.
I don't. So I donated them. And I think it's almost that same philosophy of like a Marie Kondo thing. Like just if it doesn't bring you joy, either fix it or scrap it. And with resources, because we spend so much time, our work is so personal, we get super attached and we keep every last baggie of everything. Like, but I might need these manipulatives. That was 2 textbooks ago. You don't use realidades. Stop it. Get rid of it.
That comment that you received from somebody that it's not so much that we fear change, but we fear not being supported in the midst of the change. If you flip that, what really brings us joy and a sense of security so that we can do our job. Let's invoke Maslow here, right? If you're not feeling safe and secure, you're not going to be creative, and you're not going to be visionary, and you're not going to be, super excellent, because that's what we all want to be. You're just not. But if you flip that, the joy maker is the feeling of community and the feeling of support and the feeling that we're in this together. And I see that placard in some of my neighbors' yards, and I think, are we really in this together? I don't even know you. But for teachers, it's like the people in my department, the people who teach the language that I teach, the people who teach languages, the administrator who's assigned to foreign languages, we have a pretty strong sense of community. And whatever the problem is, we deal with it because we have support, and I think that makes a huge difference. Just before we went live here, I was telling you about this book. I heard this guy interviewed yesterday on Here and Now, which is an NPR thing, and I was going to tell you his name, and I'll pull it up in a second. The title of the book is Humankind. A Hopeful History.
Oh, is it Rutger Bregman?
It's Rutger Bregman. There you go.
Internet.
And so, without trying to recapitulate everything he said in an hour and a half interview, the short of it is he's collected all of these studies through anthropology and archaeology and some of the other sciences. It's really an interdisciplinary kind of study, which I love. Mm-hmm. His conclusion, his thesis, is that despite the fact that for a long time now, about 10,000 years, human beings have been telling themselves this story that basically comes down to we're inherently bad, we're inherently selfish, we are only looking out for ourselves. That's why we're so bad and mean and horrible. He says, actually, there's not data to support that. What the data supports is that we have evolved into beings who look for and create friendship. That we are a friendly creature, and he says even the paradox. He said, because the respondents on the show were saying, yeah, but what about war? Torture, Holocaust, these horrible things. And he says they truly are horrible. Here's the paradox: even in the midst of horrible war, both sides have conglomerated around their friends. That they see what they're doing as joining in with their community of friends. And he said, what's needed now, of course, is for us to get the bigger vision. That even these people that we are tempted to fight, no, right? Doesn't that push? Doesn't that push?
Well, right. And I think about all the war metaphors we use for teaching. Oh, you're in the trenches, on the front lines. Well, it's like no freaking wonder we bond and go like, help,
Well, and so we bond with each other, and this to me, 31 years I've been around a few faculty rooms, faculty lounges, they used to say, but there was never anything lounging in there. There was never anything in that lounge that was lounge-like, if you know what I'm saying.
I lounge that's all I do in there is lounge.
Right. So. But I early on in my career, I came to see the faculty lounge as a toxic place. Yeah. Because that was where teachers were all gathered around. Now I'm thinking creating some friendliness for each other, but it was always about those rotten kids, Yeah. And it was like, well, wait a minute. I'm not here to be opposed to kids. I'm not. Right. They are not my enemy. I think ignorance.
Yes, they are.
I think ignorance is my enemy. Right. I think kids who think that they don't need to study other languages is an enemy idea. That I want to do battle with, but not with kids. So
there's camaraderie. There's camaraderie in a common enemy.
Oh, well, there is, and
so when we make it the kids, it's like
that's what I think he would call the short view. Is that we created a friendliness around a common enemy, but what we need is the bigger vision that says, even the ones that we think of as enemy could be our friends.
Yes,
and we really could achieve a kind of a peaceful existence. So I ordered the book instantly. I was driving as I was listening to it. So when I got home, I ordered the book, and I'm hoping to get some insight from it. But yeah, the teachers fearing change, not so much as not being supported in change. I think that's probably inherent. Am I going to be supported as I go through this thing? And I think that's the big fear when we're looking at questions about the materials that we're using.
Yeah.
Or questions about how am I supposed to deliver? How am I supposed to teach Latin 1? By the way, I am teaching 3 sections of Latin 1, and I did that to myself because I'm the department chair. 3 sections of Latin 1. How am I going to do that with some in the room and some at home? And there's still a lot of questions to be asked and answered. And you've said it this morning. What's really behind my thinking is who's going to help me? How am I going to be able to do this? So
how am I going to do this? Right. And if I can't do this, what's the consequence? Because I know I was telling somebody the other day, maybe it was Amy Leonard or somebody, when I joined Lang Chat on Twitter, I joined, and I didn't know this at the time. I might have thought it, but it was for sure subconscious. But Lang Chat's been going strong for 10 years. When I joined Lang Chat about that time ago, I was in a department that was toxic in a lot of ways and had some really excellent teachers, but collegially and congenially, really toxic and traumatic. And it took me about a year and a half after leaving the school, before I was able to not think about it every day. And I realize now, looking back, the community that I was getting on Lang Chat and being able to share sort of, because I think of Twitter so not interpersonally. I'm like, oh, we don't have room. We're not going to chat about the things. There's no space, and I can't be. Nobody puts baby in a corner. Okay, I can't do this in 200 and whatever characters. So I saw Twitter as interpretive, you're sharing amazing things, thank you, and then I saw it as presentational. Hey, I did a thing that didn't suck. Share, and whatever. Yep. And I found community there in ways that I wasn't finding literally 5 feet on the other side of me with colleagues, because they were sabotaging each other, and they were doing all these kind of things. And I understand why now, and everything's fine. I've moved on. The Twitch is hardly visible. But that was a lot for me to think about. And so I also think about support, like defining support for yourself. And so when you have bought, a class set of novels, when you've bought a subscription to this, and then something with it changes, or someone says, hey, that book you love, little problematic, it's easy to be like, wait, but I bought it with my own money, but it's my favorite unit. Or I mean, and I don't think it's selfish to say, or lazy. I already have stuff that I can use with it, because we already reinvent the wheel so many ways every year that and now we don't know what's going to go on. So it's like exhausting just to think of doing it with the stuff, while having all the things. And now you're like, and I might not have the things. But again, like anything, I have to zoom out and get out of my own head and go, it'll be fine. It's going to happen because it has to. It'll be okay. If it's not, you'll know, and you'll figure out something. But I think we need to look at, again, I come back to those resources. Like, am I able to reflect on those meaningfully with people I trust? And do I have people in my life who would say, Bob, that you gotta change whatever, or like, Meredith, I know your intentions are really good with this unit, but you're still painting X population as sort of other. And it's like, okay, thank you. And are those conversations in a place that I'm comfortable with? For me, it's not like social media, because again, I don't know. I'm like, call me or text me. Like, it's just like, get someplace in my actual life. But, some people are comfortable having those conversations there. And so I think all of those things kind of tie together, and just look at how personal our work is.
Yeah, that's I think a nice seg. You've posted the link to John Coward's blog. We both know John, and respect immensely the work that he does. He's been a teacher. He's now an administrator. He's a workshop presenter, especially around classroom, foreign language classroom, and classroom management and that sort of thing. John posted this blog this past week. I'm a racist educator, and here's what I'm doing about it. Which when you read and say out loud is just it's a showstopper. And it's a provocative title, and he does an incredibly good job of writing about what that means. And my short summary of what he means by I'm a racist and I'm a white supremacist is, and he says before you close my blog, let me explain what I mean by that. And,
like, wait, come back.
And what he means by that is, and I totally embrace this, I, as a white man, have and continue to benefit from the culture, the society, the government, the systems, the organizations, the companies, every structure in this country I benefit from just because of my skin tone.
Yep.
And I don't have to, as I said to you before we even started this morning, all I have to do is breathe.
Listen, you're a show horse, not a workhorse, okay?
Exactly. That is all that is required for me to benefit from a white supremacist, racist culture, and that's it. And then you've kind of invoked it already a couple of times. He uses the metaphor of newer cars. My wife has a newer car, and we were just driving together, and I always forget this thing is there. If you go to make a switch lanes, there's a camera that comes on and shows you your blind spots, right? And it's like, I'm craning to look and see. And Lydia says,
no need.
No, you can just look at the camera, right?
That's
what I forgot. Well, so he invokes that metaphor of showing us our blind spots. And you just talked about that. How is it that none of us can see our blind spots? We need other people to help us see our blind spots. And so his blog set me into reflection about who are my blind spotters? Who are my blind spotters,
Yeah.
And I'm still reflecting on that. I need people, and you said this a minute ago too. You used the word trust. I think in my career that it's become the most important word. for everything that I do.
Yep.
My blind spotters have to be people that I trust to some degree. Otherwise, if you're somebody that I don't trust and you come to me in whatever format, and you kind of invoke this too, Meredith, this in what format do people give us this information? If I don't trust you and you bring me this information, I'm automatically suspicious, right? And defensive. And somebody who's blind, who's now defensive, is maybe double blind, right? So.
Right. Well, it's like yelling that your fly is down.
That means I start waving my sword, but I can't see who I'm slicing.
Thank you. Right? And I'm yelling, Bob, your fly is down. And you're like, you could have whispered that, and it's like, you did not have to like put on a megaphone. Like, I'm here for the whisper, like I'm not here for the megaphone.
Actually, I'm so glad you said that. I've forgotten where it was. I was doing a workshop somewhere.
Oh no.
A male colleague who I know and trust walked up to me and whispered, "Your fly is open."
Thank you.
It was like, right. Now what do I do? Because I'm standing here.
Right. Thank you. You whispered it. I already have to fix it publicly, or like maybe like scurry off to the side. So I don't want to have like, you didn't have to announce it and so that I have to fix it publicly. Like you could have whatever, call out, call in. I'm like, call me for sure. But like,
well, it was, so the message was delivered quietly. The fix had to be done publicly.
That's exactly it. I'm like, and when is it not, and we forget how public our jobs are, because when we talk about trust and vulnerability, we are so vulnerable in front of students. It's like watching yourself. I mean, I watched myself. So that same department was a good year. I got put on a developmental plan, winning that year, and had to record myself, whatever, like not as much as I did. But then when I started recording, I mean, you can't watch that stuff sober. I needed like a glass of wine. I had to watch it. You need like a 2-drink minimum to watch yourself teach.
Yes.
Because I was like, this is humiliating. And then you notice how I haven't worn khakis since. Then you notice how serious about that. I'm dead serious. Then you notice how vulnerable you are to kids all the time anyway. And you go, oh my God, like, did I say that? Or do I do that when I talk? Or why are my eyebrows like whatever? And so we talk about trusting adults a lot, but it's like, wow, we already put kind of a lot of trust in kids. Sure. Do we have student blind spot blinkers as well?
Yeah. And, I think that trying to cultivate a classroom environment where kids trust me and I trust kids is just paramount. That's just, like I said, trust is really core to everything that I think of myself as doing. And I think that when students complain about teachers, it's because that's missing. There may be other things that are going on, but at the core is the lack of trust. And so, it's, I had a class 2 years ago. When I say this, people are going to go, "Oh, wow, how nice to have a class of 9." That's never happened in my career. It will never happen again. But I had a
nine what?
Yeah, nine students. Right? It was a Latin 5 class of 9 students. Just for contrast, this year I have a Latin 5 class with 29. So it's like,
thank you. That's better.
Remember that. So it was a class of 9 students. They were all girls. And of the 9 girls, one was white. All the others were girls of color from a variety of ethnic backgrounds. And I had taught most of them. At some point earlier in their high school career. So it was kind of a reunion. And the couple that I had never taught before, we all sort of got into this tight little group very quickly. It was the delight of my day because it was a small class and we had this camaraderie, and all good. And I was also at that time probably reading Robin DiAngelo's book White Fragility and a number of other things, and doing some extra work on myself, which I feel like is an ever ongoing thing. And I decided one day I'm going to go in and introduce myself. Now this was like in January, so we'd been together for a semester and a month, right? And I went in and I said, before we start today, I said this in English. I said, before we start today, I want to introduce myself. And they all looked at me and kind of sat back. And I said, my name is Bob Patrick. I've been 58 years old. I've been teaching for 28 years. I have a PhD in Latin. I have a Master's of Divinity and Theology and a BA in Greek and Hebrew. And I'm a white man. And there was that. There was a little giggle. There was this silence. And then there was 50 more minutes of conversation about how it is being who we are. And the white student and I were the only ones in the room who never felt like we had to identify ourselves as an ethnicity. And all the others in the room talked openly, and there were tears. I mean, before it was over with, most of us were in tears over the experiences of being identified as soon as you walk into the room as. Then all these blanks, right? Two of the girls were Muslim, and they wore a headdress, and that already, regardless of skin tone, they walk into the room and they're identified as. And it was just so that was a huge eye opener about how I benefit from walking around the world, and all I have to do is breathe. Those 9 girls helped me with some of my blind spots that year. You know, they helped me see and hear things that I didn't have to. Right.
And so it's like, is it, I think about this a lot too, when, I don't know, when people comment on different things, I get a lot of, I know, so we're opposites in where you're a man with longer hair and I am a lady with shorter hair. And so trade ya. And it's
been there, done that.
Right? I know. I'm like, I did the long hair. I'm good. I got my fix. You can keep it. And it's funny to watch. So it's funny to look again, like you said, as a white, straight, cisgender female, that I even get chosen marginalizations. I get to get a little racy and like have a short haircut and a lot of visible tattoos. And I get to be like, whatever. And nobody automatically says, oh, here comes X. Here comes Y, here comes, nor does anyone ever say things like, oh, Bob, or I assume they don't. Bob, where's your family from? What are you? No one expects me to speak Gaelic, even though, no one's like, oh, Irish family. Did they preserve the language? Oh, you don't speak Gaelic. Are you really even,
Exactly.
And it's like, all those things we do to kids, like that don't speak Spanish, don't speak French, don't speak Urdu, whatever in their homes, all those sort of marginalizations, how privileged is a perspective to be able to choose some and go, yeah, I think I'll do this thing. Yeah, I think I'll do this thing. Whereas something, I can walk into a job interview and feel qualified and in my own right, kind of, and defend any professional endeavors and not go, oh yeah, and is this unprofessional? Like, I hope this doesn't affect anything because, whatever, as opposed to just seeing my name on the resume and automatically going, nope, you're now in the no thank you pile for even if those reasons.
Even if those conversations with students or colleagues are kind and curious, kind and curious. There's no animosity. I'm simply curious. It's just one more time that they've had to go through and explain, yes, my family is of Mexican heritage. We've been living here for 5 generations. I don't speak Spanish. My parents don't speak Spanish. My grandparents didn't speak Spanish. Somewhere back there, somebody spoke Spanish. That's all true for me. It's the same Irish heritage. Somewhere back there, somebody spoke Gaelic, but nobody remembers.
Thank you.
And nobody asks.
Absolutely.
And nobody
asks. And I don't know that anybody cares because we're not seen as exotic. We're not like otherized in that way of like, oh, wow, what are you? And you're like, it's me, I guess. I wrote in my notes too, that what you were saying about trust, I found, I reflect on that, the aforementioned department experience. And I reflect on a lot of conversations with students over the years and that kind of thing. And it comes back to, I think, because teaching is so personal, right? We bought the thing, we did the training, we got to the conference. And then if I'm a little bit disappointed or something changes, I'm like, that's it. It was obviously all for naught. Because I think the heart of trust, when we trust in a vendor, when we trust in an administrator, when we trust in a conference program scheduler, I think from trust is both the root of hurt, but also the root of joy. You know, you find yourself going like, why won't, if we're in the same department and it's like, you know, switch roles or whatever, or you're you're a department chair as you are, and I'm under you, and I'm just like, oh God, Bob again, you know, like, it's like, who hurt you? Like, why is there no trust there? Because if there's a valid reason in that department, there was a reason not to trust. So I'm not saying that like everyone just trust each other. That's very Pollyanna, but like the trust had been broken repeatedly. And I realized that was what hurt me. It was to undermine reputation and to undermine my evaluations and all those kind of things. And I wasn't the only person. And so those were kind of the products of that. But the point was to like completely just undermine the trust and make people feel like, you know, like they don't know where they can turn without like, you know. And so it's, I think in trusting, whether it's the stuff we use to teach or the people we surround ourselves with, or again, like the forums that we're comfortable having conversations. I think trust is, I don't know. It's so personal.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And the truth is we all bring our stuff into our workplace, right? I mean, when you ask who hurt you, well, if I've been hurt deeply enough or significantly enough, that's coming in the door with me.
Oh, period.
It comes in the door with each of our students as well. But if it's significant enough that it's spilling over into my relationship with you as a department member, then who hurt me? And why is that so still unresolved that I'm spilling it over onto you? And, you know, well, I think we probably encounter colleagues and students like that from time to time. And if we're in a place where we can, the question is, so how do I reach out to you in a way that bridges some of that hurt so that you don't have to spill that hurt over onto me right now? Maybe, you know, over lunch one day, something of your story will come out and that will begin to heal a little bit. But you have to know that I'm trustworthy first, right? When people spill stuff on us, it's real easy to go, oh, you got your stuff on me, and that doesn't engender trust. You know, it's
gross. What even is that? You know?
What did you do? What did you do? You know,
that's why we work back.
Elsie's made a comment here about it not being easy to be a brown or black person, no matter what your level of education. It just reminds me about a conversation. I've had a colleague in my career, person of color, and over time, and I would say he and I would agree, looking back at the beginning of our colleagueship when we first started working together, we probably looked askance at one another, you know, kind of like, who is he and what's his story? We ended up having lunch together for a number of years, and really a true friendship developed out of it. And he said once in a professional development group, he said, Bob is the only white person in my entire career who has ever acknowledged to me that he knew it was difficult for me in ways that it wasn't difficult for him just because of the skin tone, And I recalled us having those kind of conversations, but it just broke me that no other white person had ever broached that subject. And
it's not even like putting yourself on a thing. You're not even like, oh, because you know you're working on yourself. So you're not like, come on, guys, catch up. You're like, oh my God, because I know I've been doing a super insufficient job. You're like, and I'm, how are other people not even like?
No, I mean, the white people working on ourselves, you know, around issues of race and other kinds of issues, it's like driving with tons of blind spots. You know, the system has set us up not to have to see.
It's like one.
As I said, I keep going back to all I have to do is breathe. You know, and that's the system has set me up for that kind of success. And so, working on ourselves is itself a study in the blind leading the blind. And yet we do it, and we do it. You know, we keep doing it, and it was just kind of when he said that, I thought, oh my God, this is so awful. This is so how do you, I mean, so of course my level of respect for him went through the roof at that point, and I already loved him to death, but he has persevered and done extraordinarily well, and is when I think of good teaching and teachers I want to be like, he's in that top tier list. When I'm department chair, I have to go and observe teachers. Very often when I leave his room, it's with an email that I'm shooting out to the whole department. This is what I saw your colleague do today. We should all try this. But
FYI.
But he developed all of those wonderful skills and arts as a teacher, and had to deal with being othered and all other kinds of things because of the tone of his skin.
Oh, absolutely. I think too, it's that trust. I think sometimes people don't trust themselves to be able to have that conversation with themselves, like to be able to reflect interpersonally or intrapersonally. And so being able to go, okay, I think I'm doing X and Y, like better, and I'm working on it. And even then, like we were saying, like even then it's not enough, yada, yada, yada. But like, I think people it goes back to reading John Cowart's, post, like we were saying, where we were like, where he's like, I'm a racist, I'm a white supremacist. My instinct was, no, you're not, John. Like, it was like defending him to him. Where I was like, John, you stop that right now. You stop that silliness, because you're not. We both know. And then I was like, stop, keep reading. Like, I had to really, temper my reaction and go, read past the word, because as he's defining it, spot on. Been there, done that. I've done the same things that he mentioned. That's me, right? I'm like, I thought this was autobiographical, John, because now you're telling my story. And I felt, vulnerable in there.
Yeah. In the middle of his blog, he lists, and I'm just going to read these out real quickly so we can toss it into the mix, because my God, 45 minutes have passed. He talks about rules of poverty and rules of middle class. And again, as white people, we don't have to know these rules. And that's another blind spot. So rules of poverty. You laugh when you're disciplined. It's a way to save face. Noise level is higher. Nonverbal information is more important than verbal. Emotions are openly displayed. The value of your personality is your ability to entertain the group. Discipline is about penance and forgiveness, not change. The concepts of repair and fixing are not always present. I mean, oh my God, that's restorative justice all in one phrase, but that's a whole conversation. School is seen as a social outlet more than a tool to better the future. Driving forces of behavior are survival, entertainment, and relationships. Now, rules of middle class. Formal register is always used in an interview. Discipline is about changing behavior. To stay in the middle class, one must be self-governing and self-supporting. A reprimand is taken seriously, at least the pretense is there, without smiling and with some deference to authority. Choice is a key concept in life. The future is very important. Formal education is seen as crucial for future success. Work and achievement tend to be the driving forces in decision-making. Those are two very different sets of rules, and if you don't know them, as a white teacher walking into the room, loud noises, laughter that's inappropriate, using slang instead of formal register. I mean, all those become the immediate kinds of things that in blindness we might turn into a punitive disciplinary issue.
Yes, and that we judge each other based on. If I walk past your classroom and I'm like, God, they're awfully loud. Oh, it's Dr. Patrick's class. We have those colleagues, and we've all either, like, I've been on the end of that, as foreign language class, and especially if you're looking, especially as a language class, but if you're looking at CI framed teaching, where there are some things, heaven forbid you be like desk free, all of these things, people automatically walk by and they crane their neck. I mean, they stop, as you guys are all, it's like you guys have several people with sort of what's probably seen as like non-traditional, and people stop and they crane how do you do tests? How do you do? Because they're automatically going like through the Rolodex of what school looks like. And oh my God, it's so loud. I mean, I've literally had teachers, and kids are just, granted 36 of them, are just like shooting the breeze, totally productive. Also sounds a lot like a faculty meeting before things start, just saying. Like just shooting the breeze, hanging out, whatever, doing their work, but like chatting, you know, whatever. Maybe one's got like an AirPod in, whatever. And it's like automatic, it's just judgment, judgerson all over the face where they're like, oh, one of those classes. And you're like, no, these kids are awesome, whatever. And you realize in that moment, oh, like you're seeing this as ineffective, and you're judging my ability as a teacher, and you're judging my management, and now you're blaming some other thing because you can see them trying to like put you in a box, and they're like, oh yeah. When you're young, I just blamed it on youth. Like when I was young, I was like, oh, I'm probably not very good. Like this is my first year or whatever. And then you'd get those looks, but then you'd look at the lesson and go, no, that was fun. Like that was good. And not only was it fun, was it somewhat effective because it took a while, but that first year was a lot of coloring. So I was like, we're out of time. Like, help, I'm underplanned. And so they colored a lot of, and not effective like cultural, like no, it was just coloring.
Well, and this may circle back around to where we started when we talked about, you know, materials that we're using and the revisions that need to be made and how we're processing appropriate critique and all of that. I think Robin DiAngelo is the source of this. It may not be, so don't hold me to that. But somewhere in there is the idea that a part of white culture and really white supremacy, which is the whole system that we live and breathe in. You know, I maintain that we've all been infected and that we're all affected. Nobody escapes white supremacy. It's just that those who look like us, all we have to do is breathe. You know, until we begin to discover what it's done to us. And one of the things that it's done to us is that it holds up this standard of perfection. That nothing is okay unless it's perfect. And of course, secretly, we'll all say, but nobody can be perfect. But we're going to keep trying for perfect because perfect is the requirement, right? And that requirement of perfection that nobody can win works toward my favor and against those who don't look like me, you know, whether it's gender identity or ethnicity or whatever, it still works toward me, even though I can't achieve perfection. So for me, the degree to which I've been able to let go of the requirements of perfection is the degree to which classroom has become more joyful, learning has become more successful, classroom has become more equitable. And I mean, I'm not saying just be less perfect and everything will be okay. I'm just saying that drive for perfection. Here's what it looked like for me. If I have a lesson plan, I always have a lesson plan.
I know, we heard you. When I have a lesson plan.
When I have a lesson plan, when I'm looking at the lesson plan, if I get to the end of my 52 minutes and I haven't finished everything on the lesson plan, it's, you know, the sort of younger version of myself would have, I didn't finish the lesson plan. Tomorrow I'll have to go twice as fast, right? Because I've got to make up for today.
Right.
And now it's more like, wow, 30 years and I'm still planning too much. So let go of that. What did happen today? That actually works really well. And I think instead of what I have planned for tomorrow, we're going to do more of what we did today because that really worked. It's also letting go of perfection is when somebody comes to us and says, I think you have this blind spot. To be able to take a breath and go, you know, that's really possible.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to go work on that for a bit. I might want to come back and ask some questions. Can I come back later if I have some questions, you know? That's really hard to do. That's where my perfectionism kicks in because no, you can't be right because I'm perfect.
Hello, hi, have we met? I am perfect.
So
I think you've confused me.
That's a big piece of it. So if I write something, if I publish something, if I do a workshop, something, if I write a blog, this is where John says, you know, somebody came to him and said, this thing that you wrote 4 years ago, it's racist. You need to take it down. And as you and I have noted, this person came to him privately.
Yeah.
He wasn't publicly shamed. He wasn't named in order to validate how much more awake I am than you are. It was brought to him privately. He listened and he responded. And man, that's a powerful blog that he's written this week. But you can't do that if you're gonna hold on to perfectionism with a double-fisted grip.
Right. Well, and hold others to a higher standard than you hold yourself.
Right.
You know, how many times did teachers go, I don't accept late work and da-da-da-da-da. And then you see them like scrambling to turn in those HR videos late. And it's like, guess what? You're human like the rest of us. Yep. Like, it's okay. I was going to ask you, what is your chosen, well, it's a two-pronged, what's your chosen forum? So if I'm your blinker and I'm like, blind spot, what's your chosen medium? And how did you cultivate the relationships to be able to have those blind spot blinkers? Not who are those people, like kind of for those people.
Yeah. So if somebody in my circle of trusted friends and colleagues were to come to me face to face and say, "Hey, Bob, blind spot," I'm not going to lie, it would hit me here, you know, and I could take it from them and go, wow, okay, thank you. And I think I probably face to face would probably say, I'm going to need a minute.
Yeah.
But thank you. Right. Thank you. Know that I'm grateful, and I'm gonna go ponder this and reflect on this, and I may need to come back and ask some questions if you don't mind. You know,
right.
I think that from someone that I trust and respect, see, that trust word keeps coming in there. A text, a phone call, a face-to-face, those would be welcome. Those would be welcome forums. What about you?
I was gonna say the same, because I know for me, like, I mean, anybody, again, our work is so personal that we're so used to teaching, and especially being a white teacher, you know, power and control are of the utmost. Yep. You know, like you were saying, that's what people judge when they go, she's lost control of the class. You know, she has no power. And that's why we retaliate on certain things. Oh, you all aren't going to do this assignment? Okay, that's it. I'm taking this up, you know, and you've lost it. You know, you didn't have it to begin with, but now you've really lost it. And so we retaliate, and it's power and control, and it's all the things. But ultimately, when someone says something to you, about the equity or lack thereof in your class, or if they think you're just using equity as a buzzword, you know, like, oh, that's cute, Bob, you're new to the convo, you know, whatever. That can also be highly hurtful, because none of us knows what any of us is doing behind closed doors. I mean, we could be doing X and saying Y, or vice versa, and being, you know, whatever. And so I think for me, if it stings true, it probably rings true. You know, there's that thing, like you said, if you're like, oof, you know, you're like, okay, wow, okay, great. And I think also being aware of that and being like, I need to take a minute, like that, harnessing that power of pause, because if you've got the relationships with students that we should have, and with colleagues, and you react poorly, now you're punishing the behavior you actually want to see. So you've said students, like, relationships are great, and they go, this says like indigenous people are all primitive. You know, and you're like, are you questioning the book that I paid for with my own money, that I've created? You know, all of that investment bias comes in, and you're like, how dare you? But you literally just said that relationships are most important, and that's why we, you know, whatever. So I think for me, my chosen forum is from students privately, but in person. But you know what? They've done it publicly too, which I think it also has some value. But I think it's in the delivery. Like, they were gentle. And I think you can, my philosophy is always like, take your work seriously, take yourself less seriously. So I think they knew that, like, that's going to be heavy, but also I hear you and I appreciate that. I don't know that adults do that as well as kids sometimes, if that makes sense. And so for me, I don't want to have this conversation on Twitter or like in the comments of something, because then I'm just like trying to piece together all the things. And by the time you've taken, I mean, there's no context, there's no tone, you're seeing it, you're catching it as whatever you're reading it as. So I'm ascribing all of this intent and in tone, whatever. I'd rather, like you said, text, call, in person. Yep. And I think that relationship, we keep throwing around the word relationship, but for me, preferably, because we do so much online interacting, and I mentioned Lang Chat earlier and those kind of things, I'd like to have met the person.
Yeah.
If it's going to be public, I'd like to have met you. If it's going to be private, stranger.
And that public thing, whether it's social, especially if it's social media, it's like being left to zip your pants up in front of the crowd.
Absolutely.
You'll do what you have to do.
Right. But I'm gonna zip it, but my face will be red.
Right. Yeah. By the way, in the book Humankind: A Hopeful History, one of the pieces of evidence that he cites is that human beings blush.
Oh yeah.
And that the fact that we blush means that we are never completely able to mask our emotions.
Amen.
That when we blush, we are acknowledging to people around us that we are in relationship with them, that we affect each other, that we want to be friends. And he does say, he said, the individual human beings who get past blushing are really toxic and are really dangerous, because they are suppressing something that has evolved to keep us connected. So, that's, I just want to mention, I know we're pretty much out of time here. When you talk about the classroom and creating that kind of space where, people are comfortable with each other and trust each other, I can't say enough about Christopher Emdin's book. And I want to just keep throwing it out there. 2 years ago, our group of Latin teachers did a year-long book study with it, and then we were actually able to go and hear Christopher Emdin at UGA give the Francis Early lecture.
Right. You mean that time we snuck out of school early?
That's right. Oh my God.
That time we played hooky, and I had to leave. Did I tell you this? I left my purse in my car that morning, so that when I walked outside, it just looked like I was just walking to my car. I forgot something, and then I just left.
It was all these Latin teachers and some lone Spanish teacher who snuck out with us.
She should probably get disciplined for that.
Wasn't he amazing? So the title of the book is for white folks who teach in the hood and all the rest of y'all, and he calls it reality pedagogy. And to sort of it's what made me think about it, Meredith, was when you evoked John Cowart's identification of power and control. That what do teachers in the room do with their power and their control? And of course, Christopher Emdin is all about sharing that power. And he calls it creating cosmopolitanism, the cosmopolitan classroom. And in a truly cosmopolitan classroom, you've shared that power that legally belongs to you as the teacher in the room, but you've shared that power with the kids in the room. And when they own it, oh my God, there is no stopping what can happen in that classroom. When they own, you can, and we've had this experience in our program now where, for whatever reason, bathroom emergency, assistant principal at the door, whatever, a kid crying out in the hallway, we have to leave the room, and they just carry on because it's their thing. It's not just my thing. And so that is, I live for that. I live for those moments when the thing that we've created keeps happening. I had to, I was away this last year, I'm going to say 4 or 5 days to either do some district work or to go do workshop kind of stuff. And, but I had shared out all my power with every single class, and all I had to say the day before I left was, I'm going to be gone tomorrow. Here's what I'm leaving you. So-and-so's the sub, but you all know what to do, and you all have your jobs. And then I would come back to this note. Oh my goodness, this was just the most amazing class. They all seemed to know what to do, and they all did it. And it was like, because it's their thing.
Right, exactly. And there isn't it's not the thing that seems effective in the moment, but we know isn't, where it's like, you just wait till your father gets home, because that's your other parent admitting, I got nothing on you. You know, like that's the thing. Like, yep, I can't do anything, and I know I can't. So it, you know, the sub's not going, you just wait till you're a teacher. It's like the consequences will be natural if they act a fool, and we know they do sometimes. Like, or if you're young and inexperienced and you haven't been able to cultivate that, and you know, sort of self-actualize like in a Maslow teacher kind of a way. Then come back and deal with the thing. Don't deal with the emotion of the thing, because the emotion of the thing is just going to tick you off. And then you're going to be mad with kids, not frustrated with behaviors. Or again, take it back to the sub. Did they feel the trust in themselves to be able to handle it and go, you know, is this the right hill to die on today? Like, is this the battle I should be picking? It's just their phones. And then I have to go back and think like, how were my instructions? Because you know, they can they absolutely pop in some AirPods, even like hold up their little, because you and I both know we're all like, bring your own device where we are. And so it's like, can they bring their phone? Can they pop in some music or watch a YouTube video and do their work? Yes. Like let them be, you know, to a degree is, it, you know, it's kind of the name of the game when you're gone. And so as teachers, are we leaving effective enough work? Do they trust us to have our planning and to have our organization together, that they know it's not busy work?
Right.
Because that's half the thing is, if you had just been like, do these worksheets, they're like, this is dumb. Like, and there's no consequence for not doing it because it's not graded. And if it were graded,
and because it was
why
dumb.
are we doing it while he's here? Yeah. Like if it's graded, why don't we have any scaffolding or support? It's like, goodbye. It's like the instructor just leaving swim lessons and pushing everybody in, you know, like later, super important. I'm out of here. Like,
but they got wet, right? They got wet. So it was effective. Yeah.
Guys, you're fine. You're fine. You know? And I think about kind of all of that, that we have to think about or worry about. My last question for you, I was thinking about, we had mentioned in in a previous conversation, like calming the noise, because this is all a lot to think about. So if you've got people having conversations with you either privately or publicly, Kelly mentioned on Facebook, and I totally agree. She said on Twitter, and again, I think it's because Twitter's just hard, right? Like, again, I see Twitter interpretively and presentationally, and people start getting like interpersonal, and I'm like, I don't know that I have time. Also, I can't find the previous that I'm good. No, thank you. Kelly said on Twitter, it becomes more of the person shaming you like you meant to do it poorly, and they look better for calling you out to see how woke they are. Like they saw this thing, they've read more. It isn't about helping you grow. And I think there's some truth to that, because again, I'm going to ascribe like whatever it is, maybe I'm insecure about or secure about, because I know what I'm doing in my room. I know the conversations I'm having with colleagues, and I know the friends of color in my life that I'm having these conversations with. And then I can ask all the questions, and then they can go, stop asking questions, Google it, you know, and you're like, okay, thank you. And you can move on, or, you know, whatever, like, but you'll tell me, right? You'll tell me when that's enough questions. They're like, Meredith, that is also a question. I'm like, okay, well, let me know. I'll just be here. And so when it is public, I think when there's a limit on the characters, there's an abruptness. And so it can feel like a lot where you're like looking at resources, trying to plan for the year, trying to make relationships with students, with colleagues, having those conversations, being open to all that. And we have so many different ways we can do that, like on our phones, in person, whatever. How do you calm like the noise? How do you not feel, or maybe we don't, because we're also in the middle of a pandemic, but how can we calm that inner, what's the word, like chaos, it feels like?
It's funny because I've seen more people in my life, a lot of them are teachers, asking, like on Facebook, how do I deal with anxiety? How do I calm all the nonstop thinking? And maybe we all have different ways that we do that. But last night was a great example. I told you when we started, I learned at 10:42, just before I was about to turn the lights out and go to sleep, that our rosters were available. And so, of course, I said to Lydia, I said, oh, I have a laptop in the bedroom. Let me just open that and see. And I did. And then I turned the light out, and it was like it was all right there. The lesson planning, the imagining, all those, and it was, and I thought, oh no, this is not happening. And this is something that I've kind of cultivated over the years, and I don't offer it as a quick fix, but when I realize that I'm being overwhelmed with too much of that stuff, I just stop. and I breathe and I remind myself, you know what? All of that stuff is going to be there when you wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine piling it up like dirty laundry and putting it over here
and so ignoring it.
When I wake up, you know. I think that started for me years and years and years ago. In the first 10 years of my teaching, I was actually asked to be an administrator, and I did serve as an assistant principal for 3 years. And because the bell ringing means nothing to an administrator, you're just working. I was staying later and later and later. There was a time in my second year when I was at school until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. Just talk about perfectionism with the belief that if I just stay 30 more minutes, I'll get it all done.
Just one more thing. I just need to do one more thing.
And then the day came, and I think it was around the time that our third child came. My wife's also an educator. That it occurred to me that even if I stayed all night long, there would just be more. Yeah. And so couldn't I just decide at 4 o'clock in the afternoon that it'll all be there tomorrow? You know, and go home and be with your children and be with your wife and be with your, at home and have some life, or like last night, have some sleep, because the pile is all the things that I want to think about right now are going to be there tomorrow. And again, it's not magic, because I can make that decision and make the pile of things for tomorrow morning and in 30 seconds be thinking about them again. But for me, I just do it again. It's like, nope. There's another piece of dirty clothing. That's going to be there in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, stop it. It's that constant reminder to yourself, like we do anything when we obsess, this can become kind of an obsession. A lot of these conversations, because they can be had in so many ways. So you feel like your phone's blowing up or your whatever. And it's bring. We're so accessible to so many people in so many ways. You reminded me of that thing that I was telling you from The Joy of Missing Out. God, I love that book. Where she says two things that stuck with me. Being overwhelmed might not actually be having too much to do. It's not knowing where to start. And it's like, oh man, like that for me, when I feel overwhelmed, I start feeling like, oh, I've gotten in over my head. Like I've got too many things. I don't know that that's true, as much as I just don't know where to start. And for me, along the same lines, you should see my phone. I'll open it here. I'm very anti any red number, because the red number makes me feel bad about myself. So I have all notifications off. And I put all my apps down here in these separate folders, because I also don't want to be I keep 3 over there just for easy. But I also don't want to be sliding back and forth all the time. I just can't. I want to see your message when I want to see your message. I want to attend to email and social media and whatever on my terms. And so for me, it was very to calm. I was getting addicted to that chaos. And I felt in my head like I was addicted to being accessible. And then people laud you for it. They go, oh my God, have you ever, parents, students, admin, colleagues, Dr. Patrick, he emails back so fast. And you're like, because now you've trained them to expect that. Now they're like, at all hours of the night. And then you said with the computer, you look at where you're pulling in these, you look at what you're bringing into your private spaces, it's like the laptop into the bed and I'm like, oh yeah, I do that. Okay, how are you sort of preserving those sacred spaces of rest? And for me, it's that. I don't want to see any of it.
That's fantastic. It's like the bell ringing at school. When the bell rings, we jump, right? Because we know stuff is going to start happening. Ting. But we create those things in ways that we don't necessarily have to as well. No, it's funny that we had just gotten back from a quick trip where I had taken a laptop with me and pulled it out of the suitcase and stuck it on a counter in the bedroom. I never have laptops in the bedroom for these very reasons. Now, I do take my phone, but last night it was like, oh, there's a laptop, because I was on the verge of saying I'll look that up in the morning.
Right.
Leave it for the morning, then I wouldn't have had so much turmoil to deal with. But oh no, there's a laptop in the bedroom. I'll just check now. And
I don't mind if I do. Right. No, exactly. That same year with the developmental plan is the year 2012. That's the year I stopped checking work email on the weekends because I got an email on Sunday afternoon, which is
no time.
Like,
no.
Why? Why would anybody email? And the subject line was, see me tomorrow. And so to my little self, I was like, well, I'm getting fired. That was automatically because I didn't trust it comes back to that trust, right? I didn't trust anybody. I was working 24/7 to reinvent the wheel. So needlessly, I had no boundaries. I had nothing. I had, like that book says, enough is a decision, not an amount. Yeah. I had no concept of saying enough in my life. And so when I get an email, because of course I must be checking, I must be right here, and smartphones in 2012 were, starting to get email and you could go other things, whatever. And I checked and it was see me tomorrow. And what did I do the rest of the day? Worried. I stressed out. I mean, I was nearly I felt like I was going to have a panic attack and I didn't eat the whole day. I felt like I was going to throw up. And my husband's like, we're trying to watch TV and hang out and spend time. And he's like, what is your problem? And that's when I realized when I got there the next day, it was, I'm not kidding you. We had done a fashion show. Okay. Also not communicative language teaching here, but I was new to the school and I was dying and drowning and not surviving very well. But we did a fashion show thing that was basically just presentational speaking with silly outfits. And there wasn't a lot of culture anyway, and some slight cross-dressing. And so I had taken pictures with a media center camera of where the kids were like, y ahora, Bob está llevando, whatever. Again, not my finest project, but good God, it took up a class period. And that's all I needed at that point. And so I had red paper on the floor. So it looked like a red carpet. Everyone slipped, don't do paper, get a carpet. And I had strobe lights, hysterical. It was not stroby, but kind of stroby. It was funny and it was enjoyable and it was fun. We had a great time, but I had taken pictures because it was 2012 and the quality was not very good. And so I took pictures with a digital camera that I rented from the media center. And then I gave a student the camera to take pictures because I was busy. And then that student lost the camera. And so that student set the camera down somewhere over on the countertop or behind the, there was a whole setup in the front of the classroom. And so they set it down. And I realized this 2 days later, because all of a sudden I go, oh, wait, we took pictures. Where's the camera? Yeah, exactly. And I was like, oh my gosh. So in the meantime, it's gone. I don't know where it's gone. And it ends up getting recovered by a fellow teacher, a colleague, one of the aforementioned ones, and they look at the pictures and they turn it in, but they don't tell me they turn it in. So they turn it into the administrator. That's what she's emailing about. So she emails, come see me tomorrow at your earliest convenience in the subject line. That was it. No body. And I was the next day about to let the media center know, hey, what do I owe you? Because I definitely lost a camera and this was really embarrassing. So thank you so much. And she ends up calling me in. She says, I'd like you to explain something, hands me the digital camera. And I'm like, oh my God, because I'm thinking the camera has gone somewhere and there's something super inappropriate. We had boys that had worn spaghetti strap tank tops and mini skirts with gym shorts underneath just to be funny because they wanted to flip the script a little bit on, the clothing items, whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'm all for it. Great. And I was like, oh my God, there's going to be something I didn't see. And I'm fired. No, it was dress code down the hall in the back of a group picture in the hall. Kids were this, with their little outfits or whatever. And it was a great picture. And the way far back, there was a girl with a spaghetti strap tank top. She didn't see the boy in the picture with a spaghetti strap tank top. And she's like, I don't recall getting a dress code referral from you this day. Did you not see this?
Oh my goodness.
I'm not the one taking the picture. And that was when I realized I don't trust these people and they don't trust me. And for very different reasons. They don't trust. There's no, it was the root of all of that pain.
A person that you can trust is not ever going to approach you with a gotcha.
Exactly.
That was a gotcha. It's
exactly.
You want to explain this to me knowing that you have no idea what you're talking about.
It's an ambush. It's an ambush.
And so the the real kind of changes that we're going to benefit from, all of us, are the ones that come from people that we have some trusting relationship with, and those people are going to approach us with information, with stories, with whatever that can help us be better. Even if they make us uncomfortable, they're going to make us uncomfortable. I mean, I can imagine that same conversation where the person says, I know this was checked out to you and it turned up here, and I just wanted to let you know, because I'm pretty sure you've probably been looking for it. We found the camera. You would have been still embarrassed and relieved and apologetic, but nobody was trying to expose you and shame you publicly in your workplace, and same lesson for kids. There's not I said this to you earlier, and let me put this in your mind, because we're like an hour and 20 minutes here.
Kelly Ferguson's like, this is going to be 4 hours, right? And I was like, we're here for it.
No, but
I'm kidding.
But you and I go back to work July 29th, and we need to ask folks if these conversations are useful. Maybe we should plan one sometime shortly after we've gone back to work and gotten our toes wet. So let's think about that. But this business of trust also helps to define, we've talked about this, how I feel about classroom management and discipline. Those are words that I don't really care for much anymore. When punishment is involved, there's almost always some act of public shaming. Even if it's here's the yellow slip, the yellow slip, you're wanted in the assistant principal's office. And that happens in front of their peers, and that's public shaming. It's not ever in 31 years has a student who has been punished come back and said, my life has changed. I will never do that thing again. I will, never. When they have been shamed and when they have been punished, they come back with a little bit more of a chip, a little bit more of an attitude, and a little more squinting in the eye, because they don't trust me anymore.
Right.
Or
dude.
Yeah. Or maybe they didn't trust me to begin with, but now they're really not going to, So that if it works for you as a teacher, it works for you as a student. And if it doesn't work for you as a teacher, it's not going to work for the student. We don't like to be shamed. We don't like to be publicly called out. Neither do our students. And so on that score, we probably should sign off.
Call it a day. Go back to our lounging.
Right. Thank you for having this conversation with me and making me think about stuff. And for sure. Next time, like I said, we'll just keep inviting the internet sometimes. Yeah, we will.
No, thank you. Right. Okay, I'm going to click it. Yay.
Okay, bye-bye.